Today I'm back with David Wichman. He was on one of my earlier episodes, and we're going to do a catch-up this time. He's on to some new adventures. He's a really interesting guy, has a great, gentle heart. In fact, on the first episode, he made me cry. That's only happened, I think, once or twice. But let's hear about what he's up to now. And while you're at it, again, hit the subscribe button if you haven't done it. Greetings, everyone. Wilkinson here. Today, my returning guest is David Wichman. He was here, about 6-8 months ago, something like that? Yeah. Well, welcome, David.
Thank you.
Tell my peeps hi.
Hi, peeps.
Anyway, you're up to new adventures. I know you've been around the world a couple times. Before, we talked about you writing your book, your story, blah, 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 but we're going into the next chapter now. So why don't you just update us on what's been happening the last, say, 6 months?
I really was excited about coming here today because I wanted to really discuss this new platform that I'm adventuring on. And I don't know that I keep calling it new, but it's not really new. It's something that I've been doing for years. I've worked with a lot of men, but I just recently got certified as a conscious recovery coach. And we can talk a little bit about what conscious recovery is, but I feel like one of my passions is working with men who are struggling with addiction issues. And we have a lot of that in our community, in our gay community. And so,
particularly in Palm Springs, it seems. I don't know.
I feel like it's true. I feel like it is prevalent here. And I think some of the things that I really wanted to talk about, that's why I reached out to you. I was like, oh, this would be such a great opportunity to talk about this new adventure. And I really want to say one of the things is that I really sort of cringe when I hear is the word coach, because I don't feel like a coach. I don't know what you call it, but for lack of better terminology, I call it coaching.
Oh, that's why you're not wearing a baseball cap, right?
Precisely.
Got it. Anyway, so you hate the word coach.
Yes.
Well, we can go into that. That's probably a minor issue. So what's it all about?
The coaching or the conscious recovery program? I mean, I guess here's the thing is as you know, as we talked about the last time I was on here, is that been a sex worker for many, many years. And I've worked with men around shame and body issues and sexual stuff. And I've been sober for 17 years this whole time. And those two lives have been crossing over for a really long time. And so when
they're commingling,
right? I've been commingled.
Right.
And a lot of my work has been travel, on the go. I'm really trying to stay home a little bit more. And so I was having this self-inquiry about what am I going to do next? I'm 54 years old, and the whole creating content for OnlyFans or traveling all over the world, doing what I do is not going to last forever. And I'm just like, what am I going to do now? And it just sort of arrived. I'm working on my second book, and I was writing. And
do you have a title yet?
I have a working title. It's called The Four Rooms. Yeah, it's a working title, and it's a book, very self-help like book for gay men on our sexuality, and it uses the analogy of the four rooms, of the emotional, the physical, the mental, and even the sacred or the spiritual. And I was stuck. I was like having writer's block. I literally felt the disconnection from my message go away one day about a year and a half ago. And then the other, I guess it was maybe 7 or 8 weeks ago, it came back. I was re-motivated again, and I started writing again. And while I was writing this, it had dawned on me that a lot of stuff I was writing about was directly related to and came from a mentor of mine. His name is TJ Woodward. He wrote and developed and created the conscious recovery method. It's really become more of in my mind, it's become more of a movement and a philosophy than anything else. But I just quickly shot off a text to him. I'm like, you really should start a certification program for coaching with your conscious recovery so that people like me can help other people learn this method.
Right.
And he immediately shot back to me and he was like, well, as a matter of fact, we've had a coaching certification program for a very long time, and you would be perfect for it. And he sent me some links, and
So you didn't look at his website?
Honestly, I didn't.
Right.
I hadn't been, I just sort of been living in that mindset for such a long time. And I didn't think to go over there and be like, oh, I wonder if they offer this. Because I really felt and believed that it was a program for facilitators in treatment facilities, or that it was a program that was specifically for certified addiction therapists, like psychologists and stuff like that. And I didn't think I was ever be qualified because, for one thing, I don't want to be qualified as a therapist or a certified addiction specialist. I have some opinions about that. But,
of course you do, David.
I have some opinions about it. And I want to, and also I know as a sex worker, there would be this question about, an ethics ideal or some sort of limiting perspective on being licensed in that area. Nevertheless, I said, well, am I welcome to take the coaching course? And he's like, absolutely, please do. So I was on a trip to New York. And so I did this course and I jumped in and I was so, how do I say this? It felt so right for me. I felt so connected to all of the principles. It just felt natural for me. I was like, oh yeah, I understand this. I get this. And partly because I had done conscious recovery for so many years and things like that, but it just felt really aligned with where I'm at. And I thought this would be a great way to reach men who are struggling with addiction issues, who feel outside of the paradigm of traditional recovery modalities. And what I mean by that, without being disparaging, is that this conscious recovery really adds a new layer, especially around some of the older traditional 12-step philosophies around God and sex conduct. And there's some old sort of unevolved ideas that I think conscious recovery brings to the conversation that allows people to have their experience, have their sexual wellness experience without there being this, and I don't want to say finger wagging, but more of I think in a lot of 12-step programs, they stay out of the conversation. Like, we don't have an opinion one way or another, and it's not for us to decide. Everybody,
go figure it out yourself.
Go figure it out yourself. But as a gay man in recovery, looking for a way to feel okay, looking for a way to sort of dissipate the shame and trauma, not just from our culture, from society at large, and from many years of people saying, well, your sexuality is wrong, you're wrong. Getting into recovery and getting sober, then the choir starts singing, oh, well, don't do that because you might get loaded. Don't be sexual in your first year, and don't have a relation. There's lots of, they're not really rules, they're suggestions, but it happens. And I feel like conscious recovery allows people to sort of trace the roots of all of that sort of stigmatizing messaging, and allows people to, especially people on the adventure of recovery, to sort of, for them, it allows them to actually, gives people a path to find out for themselves what their sexual wellness looks like. It's just been an exciting moment for me right now to be a part of this thing. And so it developed a little bit of evangelical, like,
Well, that's a buzzword. So I have a question.
Yes, sir.
So do straight men deal with shame? I'm guessing that, or I'm not guessing, I know that gay men have an issue with that just because so many people reject the fact that they're gay, et cetera, et cetera. But do straight men have shame issues? I don't even know. Or is that not your category and you don't care?
I do care.
Okay.
I think it's really important to talk about. I do care, and I also think it's really important to talk about that. One of the things, if you read my book and
which I did.
Right. I talk a little bit about this, that I'm really not a believer in sexuality as it defines in our traditional binary world, where we're gay, straight, bi, non-binary. I have trouble with those identifying titles, those labels. And I think what happens, and this is complete opinion, but I've really believed this most of my life, is that you become this heterosexual male, and then you're required to live within the confines of that identity. Right. And if you vary from outside of there, there's going to be pushback, or there'll be a shaming mechanism, or religion will teach you that you're whatever it is. So straight men have that same experience. I would be very, how do I say this? I think everybody has this like desire to explore and be very curious. Even one time, oh, I want to try to have sex with a guy and find out that it's not for me, right? Like if I'm straight, I'm going to have sex, I'm going to explore this thing. And to deny yourself the exploration, or to say that all of a sudden you're a sinner, or to say, oh, that's never, that's sort of macho. I don't even know how to describe it, but whatever it is, that permeates through American culture so deeply. It's a powerful, powerful mechanism for control. And it creates, which we see all the time, every day, it creates this despair. It creates this, I'm not going to explore, I'm going to stay. Here's the analogy I'll use. And I say this, I think I said this in the last podcast. We take our anger and we lock it into a room and we close the door, and then it sits there and it just stays angry. We never allow it in. We never allow it to integrate with our world, and we become... And so it festers and it gets bigger and awful, and it creates disease manifestations in the mind and in the emotions, in our spiritual areas, our sacred room, and in the body, and especially in the bodies. Yes, absolutely. And I think the same thing comes from isolating our ability to explore, to expand our conscious mind in our sexual world. I don't think it's so prevalent anymore as it used to be. I think we are slowly evolving, but I also believe that it is a part of locking up our sexual wellness, or our sexual... We identify something as wrong, we put it in the room and we lock it away, and we just let it sit there and fester and get infected and spread in through our body and our mind and our experience. And what we have now are large groups of people who are angry, sexual anger, hostile. Anyways, so that's a whole nother conversation, but yeah, I believe that does happen. And I believe that heterosexual men that identify as heterosexual or straight, who are living in the confines of those limitations, either by religion, culture, family, etc., do suffer from that shame. I had that shameful thought that I think is wrong. I'm going to put it in the room. I'm going to lock it up.
Yeah, for those listening, so this is really interesting. So a few months ago, I don't watch TV that much, but I dug the TV out of the closet and pulled it out into the family room, and I set it up with my computer, and I looked on Amazon Prime to see what movies might be. I was bored. So I found this movie called Say Yes. Are you familiar with it? It's made in 2018. And it's really interesting. I watched it several times, and I've had some of my friends watch it, and it's just what you're talking about. So the plot line, and so many guys say, people say, that's so ridiculous. That could never happen. And I totally disagree with it. So the plot line is a woman is diagnosed with terminal cancer. She's kind of a free spirit. She's married to a guy who, by the way, resembles Chris Maloney in some ways. For gay guys, if you want to watch this movie, particularly the last scene. But anyway, so she knows she's dying, and she has a twin brother who's equally as wild and crazy as she is. And her dying wish is that her husband and her brother get together as a couple when she dies.
Oh, wow.
And it's a very powerful movie. And it's really interesting to watch the main character, the husband, go through the process, because he genuinely falls in love with the brother for who he is. Now his equipment doesn't match what he's used to, but and there's a whole bunch of back and forth. There's some conflict within him. You can see it because of exactly what you're talking about. Yeah. All of the stuff that's programmed into him, and the wife is saying, fuck all that stuff,
Yeah.
But and one of the things she says is, when I'm gone, I want you to make all your decisions out of love, not fear. But it's a beautiful movie, and you need to watch it.
Yes, I do. I'm really, I'm always looking for something good. I think I stopped having a Netflix subscription, but
this is on Amazon Prime.
Oh, I have that.
It's free. Yeah,
I definitely have that.
Anyway, not to interrupt you, but
no. I love that. That's beautiful. Yeah. And I think that brings us back to the idea of kind of the work that I'm doing right now. It's just sort of, and I'm not doing that work. The men that I work with are doing that work, right? And that's why I think the word coach kind of bothers me a little bit. Just like the word, in the back of my book, my publisher wrote, or my co-author wrote, that I'm a healer. And I cringe at that word, because I don't do that. I'm not the healer. Right. I don't do the healing. I'm not the coach. I don't do the coaching, but I am a witness. I am a conduit. I am going to ask questions. I am going to be present. I am going to show up outside of judgment to the best of my ability. And, but I'm definitely not an advisor, right? I'm definitely not somebody who's going to. And so I think that brings us back to what happens is that men who
You're one who opens the door for possibilities.
Yeah. And allows them infinite number of possibilities to regulate themselves through another person's experience, not my own.
So what have you been doing to launch all this?
I built my website.
Which looks pretty good.
Do you like it?
I do.
I'm really shocked I was able to do it.
Yeah, it looks great. So
wow.
You did that?
I did do that.
Oh, wow. I thought you hired somebody.
No. I built my website. A friend of mine, Robert Black, who you might know, from Sexual Heroes, turned me on to Google Sites. And I was like, oh, this is super easy. And that's what I need. I need a website that any 2-year-old could build. And so that's what I used.
Maybe I should rebuild mine for my photography.
They just become so complicated.
Yeah.
It just becomes, when you're using these other website platforms, it just become like this whole bloat. But
well, I hired a second or third guy to redo my website a while back. Yeah. And one of my requirements was I want to be able to tweak this when you're not around here. And now I'm stuck. Everything that's on there is static and that's it.
Welcome to my world.
Yeah, and it's like, no, I keep it simple and I want to be able to update it.
You have to check out Google Sites. It is so easy.
Well, thanks for the tip.
It's so easy. You're not paying any kind of host or it's weird. Anyways, back to conscious recovery coaching. But it's an exciting time for me. And
we get on these tangents and it's your fault because you're always traveling.
Yes.
So if you would have come by and chatted once in a while.
Right.
So I'm putting the blame right over there.
You know what I'm up to. Yes.
Yep. So anyway, back to that.
It's just exciting for me because I feel like, I'll tell you what's been kind of happening historically, but it's also been something that's kind of permeated in the back of my own mind, is that I had, I think, about 10 or 12 years sobriety. And I talk about this in my book as well. And I still felt broken. I still felt there was something wrong, that something needed to be fixed. I felt like there was always a new program. And you hear this a lot in recovery, is the work is never over. You will always be a drug addict. You will always be an alcoholic. You will never, you suffer from an incurable disease. And I'm not here to negotiate or negate that or to say that that's not true or that that is true. But when you spend many, many years hearing the same message over and over and over again, you truly start living and believing that. And I was just feeling like, am I always going to be broken? Am I always going to be looking for the next thing to heal me or fix my condition? And then I got to the point where it's like, what actually is my condition? Because I'm living a pretty wildly amazing life.
Right.
I'm really super healthy. I'm in love. I have a great home. I have great friendships. I have this really quality life. Yet here I am taking this course or going to a meeting or doing this thing predicated on the idea that if I don't do these things, I will die or relapse or get loaded, or if I let my guard down, there's this, and it's an element just
or in the religious context, you're going to go to hell.
Or go to hell. Exactly. And so there's this, and you see it happen in 12-step a lot, where people come back after they've relapsed and they say, oh, well, I stopped going to meetings and I stopped sponsoring people and I stopped doing the steps and I stopped doing all this stuff. And naturally, of course, I got loaded. Well, it's because for years, you've been told if you stop doing those things, you're going to get loaded. So, of course, you're going to do exactly what you've been told to do. And it falls into that category of really manifesting and believing what you're experiencing, right? What you're seeing, what you're feeling, what you're surrounded by. And so I surround myself with these people and community, which I love. And I would never want to distance myself from recovery or distance myself from people in 12-step. Save my life. I wouldn't, but I really feel there's a bigger conversation to be had about remanifesting our disease. And I feel like conscious recovery is sort of that missing link there. It really allows you to be like, oh, there is a possibility that I'm not broken, that I am whole already, that I'm absolutely lovable, that I am a whole and perfect being, just like I am. I may have ideas and things that I want to expand on or work on. But I don't need to raise my hand and say I am broken for the rest of my life in order to stay clean and sober. I actually believe that's counterintuitive. And
you're sending a lot of negative energy into the universe.
Right. I'm broken. I am broken. Yeah. And living that belief system in my mind, in my whole being, actually, and sort of, confirming it over and over by working with other people, telling them, well, you're broken too, and you'll always be broken. And if you don't have this resource outside of you, and many people call God or universal love or unconditional love or nature, this higher power, you can't stay sober. And that brings me to this other side of, you hear a lot, there's a conversation to be had about this idea of an emptiness within. There's this God-sized hole, a lot of people call it, that cannot be filled with anything except this power greater than yourself that's out there somewhere to rely on. Mm-hmm. And I feel like that really saved me for a long time. It was really helpful for me to believe that that was true. It was really, I was suffering. I was in despair. I had been many, many years of trying to get clean and sober, many years. And so I needed something to believe. I needed something that wasn't me, a part of me,
right,
to hang on to until I got to the part where I was able to sit with myself and be like, what's going on in there? Can you sit with yourself? And I think that's where the conversation around spirit and spirituality and sacredness and this God idea come into play. And conscious recovery really talks more about that spiritual part of ourselves is the essence, our truest nature. That's that being beneath the wound. It's who we are beyond our body and our beliefs and all of the things that culture and society has taught us, and our essence. And I did this to you, and you actually cried when I asked you this question
on the last episode. Yeah,
right. Is that the key? One of the simplest exercises to do to find out who you truly are, what is your purpose, is to ask yourself that question. What do you believe? What do you wish for someone who is hungry?
Right.
You want them to be fed. Right. What do you wish for to somebody who's in pain? You want them to be soothed. And we forget that because there's a lot of things coming at us all at the same time. And so that's the work that I enjoy doing. And when that translates into the bedroom, or into our sexual wellness, into our sex lives, it's a very interesting concept. Because do we consider our sex sacred? Do we see it as spiritual? Do we consider ourselves, because we have an entire lifetime of messages that tell us how we're not like that guy.
Right.
We don't have that giant cock. We don't have that porn star body. We don't have the perfect lover. We don't have, we see a lot of what we don't have. And so we spend a lot of time forgetting who we are, forgetting that I do have this physical body, that I do have this beautiful being within me that is completely lovable, that I am sexy to many, many, that I am and I've said this for many years, there's a lid for every pot. And that lid for every pot is there. And what stops us from jumping onto the stove and turning on the heat is that we think our lid is not going to find a pot, that it's not good enough, that it's not enough.
Right.
And some of the things that takes place that allow us sometimes to feel like that we are the right lid for that pot is by taking drugs. And a lot of gay men do this. We feel like this is the key. It lets down our inhibitions.
So it's like an equalizing thing.
Right. It's a sexual and social lubricant, right? It's in the play space, in the bedroom, in the hookup, in our being able to relate. And sometimes it's true. It does help. Sometimes we are so paralyzed by our illusion of inadequacy that we want to take a substance. We want to do methamphetamine or ecstasy or LSD or whatever it is so that we can feel connected to the person or to the experience that we want to have. With addiction issues, that can be really troublesome because...
Talk about addiction for a minute. Yeah. So let's pick 4.
Yeah.
So let's take alcohol.
Yes.
Drugs.
Yes.
Sex and gambling. Is there one root cause, do you think? Or is there like some standard, this would cause this will cause that? What do you think?
Oh, no, I don't. So here's
or is it just the fact that you're addicted, whatever your addiction happens to be? It's like, that's the root.
And here's the it's a languaging issue that I have with addiction, calling something addictive. I see addictive behavior, things that we do that help us check out or not have to feel our feelings. There's the idea that we believe that this will fix, if I shop or if I have sex or if I get, enough drugs or this right amount of alcohol, then I'm good to go. I was just talking about this with a client of mine the other day. There is medicine and then there is recreation, right? And if we are using, predicating our utilization of sex as medicine or recreational drugs as medicine, are we using it as medicine? That's the question that we get to have. And then there's the recreation, which is, are we doing too much? Is it just too much fun? And there's all these little nuances. But I think...
What's the difference between medication and recreation?
I think one, and I'm happy to be wrong about this, one is that recreation, we have the agency to think that it's not coming from a place of this will fix me, that this will make me whole or this will make me better. And let's be really clear, self-medication and medicating, right? So you can go and do ayahuasca or do psilocybin mushrooms in a sacred ceremony of some sort and consider that medicine, which I find very fascinating and very...
Actually, I was just thinking that.
I think it's amazing. I think it's a wonderful modality of growth and expansion. It really is useful to a lot of people, including myself. And then there's this idea that I use this drug because it's my medicine. I'm self-medicating. Is there an opportunity to explore that? And what does that really mean? And are you doing that on your own? And so you're using your own state of being to be the committee about making decisions about self-medicating, and that I'm going to take a pain medication because that makes me feel like I fit in and I feel loose, I'm okay. I'm going to start doing meth because otherwise I can't have sex. There's a lot to it. I love the principles that conscious recovery teaches about, and I'm not sure if I'm going to say this correctly, the foundations of addictive behavior. What is the causes, the root causes of addictive behavior? And one of them is core false beliefs. We believe, and we've gotten this message our whole life, of wrongness. There's this idea of that I am not wrong, but my whole self as a person is wrong. And that is what they call toxic shame, right? There's this
sin or
being
evil.
Gay or having sex.
In a religious sense, it's sin, shame,
perfect
evil,
example.
Blah, 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 blah. Yeah.
Right. And then there's toxic shame, right? Core false beliefs. And another one is spiritual disconnection, where we have really, it's not that we've lost touch with God or fallen away from the church, which this is what I love. It's the spiritual disconnection is disconnecting with who we are within, our deep connection to the tenderness and the generosity and the kindness and also, and let me really be clear about it, the shadow of who we are, our sort of selfishness and our ego and all of that stuff, allowing it to integrate and accepting ourselves and being in this acceptance of who we are. That is where I think the true access to spirit is when we are able to touch on the tenderness while we're looking at the shadow, saying, there's anger there. There's some stuff going on. Can I sit with that? Or do I lock that in the room? Do I try to get rid of it? Do I bypass? They call it spiritual bypassing, where good vibes only. I don't want any of that negativity around me. So, and we start identifying the shadow as this thing that's bad, and we start identifying as good vibes only as good. And there's a big conversation to have that around about that, especially in recovery, because there's a lot of judgment, self-judgment of ourselves. I went to the bathhouse last night and I had all this wild sex. While I was in the throes of it, I was having the time of my life, right? But then I go and I don't have a place to share that experience with, because if I go into the rooms or I go in to talk to my friends about it, people are like, why would you do, whatever the judgment enters the space. I feel like the more we look into those ideas of right, wrong, good, and bad, and explore where did that come from and what is really true. What is really true? I do this exercise a lot. It's called Where'd You Get That Idea? And everything, and so I listed at the top of the paper, everything I learned about sex, love, and intimacy. And then you list mom, dad. What did dad teach me about sex, love, and intimacy? What did my society, my culture, my friends, my enemies? And I go down this whole list, and it's amazing the things.
Wow, I can do that in my head. No wonder I'm so screwed up.
and maybe you're not screwed up. Maybe it's that we've gotten the message, right?
Right.
We've learned this message that we learned from church, or we learned from mom, or we learned from, even if your parents were liberal and had like great sex and it was, an interesting, you did learn something about it. And some people, and here's another side, some people rebel against that or they accept it, right? There's a lot of little nuanced things that happen. And so
something I was reminded of lately, they just said, don't believe everything you think.
Right. Oh, that's wonderful. Yeah.
Yeah.
And are you, and here's the other side, are you believing everything you think? Are you observing those? You're a meditator, right? You do sort of mindfulness. The shit that comes up during meditation is so wild. But yeah, do I believe that? Where'd you get that idea? Where'd I get that idea?
Listening to everything you've just said recently, I mean, the last few minutes, when I'm looking at the news and that, it breaks my heart that so many in positions of power and position, they're all grabbing the money and they're not looking inside. And it's so sad. And is there any hope?
Well, and that's a perfect example. That's a great example to look. You see what's happening in the world today, and it's on a global scale.
Right.
And I'm not sure that it's all doom and gloom. I think it's actually really hope. I'm not a doom and gloom type of person, but the reality of the situation is that you see that people in power have not been able to.
They haven't done the work.
And is it work? I mean, is it work that they need to do? It's the uncovering of these ideas. What is that Christians use a lot? Is it, I have this deeply held conviction. I have this belief, and I don't want it to be imposed upon or violated. I have this deeply held belief, and
or questioned is the real thing.
And here's what's really powerful about that. It's like, that's an imprint. That's something you've been taught. And a new hot button word that's going around right now is indoctrination. And you want to talk about indoctrinating?
Right.
Those are imprints. And I call it imprinting because it's the things that we learned when we were very vulnerable as growing up or being convinced of. And our convictions are really powerful. And when we trace the root sources of our convictions, we often find that there are way more possibilities available to us. And even myself, I mean, I have lots of judgments, lots of opinions about things. And so, I'm not absolved of that ideal.
Right.
I don't want a right-wing nutcase imposing their values and standards on my community. I don't want that. And I resist that. And I get angry about that. And I proudly declare that. I don't lock it up and pretend like it doesn't exist. And I speak out. And I think we all do a little bit. But I think there are deeper things that happen when we go within and we find out where those judgments come from and those ideas and those messages come from. And then there's that belief, that deeply held belief of not enoughness, right? There's this, I'm not the guy with 300,000 followers on Instagram who looks like a god. And every time he posts
after
something,
photoshopping and
but the mind doesn't see that, right? It re-experiences the not enoughness. And so we oftentimes will seek out not enoughness to measure our progress, to measure, I'll be looking at somebody who I know I don't need to look like. I'm loved. I am loved. I am love. And I love my life, right? But there's this delusion that arrives, and it's old messages. And here's the other part that I really want to be clear about. I never have the expectation of being rid of it. I never had the expectation of being cured from not enoughness or to be removed from the idea that I'm not enough or that I'm going to change that thought. what I get to do, which is so important, is I get to see that not enoughness as an invitation, to look at it as something within communicating to me, to tell me, is this really true? Are you not enough? Do you believe that? Yeah. And so the way it's an adventure.
The way I look at that is, my friend Mark has said this, it's like a guest showing up in your house, whether it's what you're talking about there or some shadow part of yourself, that's shadow. So there's a guest, and what does the guest have to say to me? What's the message?
You're talking about Mark Holenstein.
Oh, yeah.
I love him so much. And
yeah,
he's such a powerful conduit.
Yeah.
Another conduit, right? It's another witness.
Right.
That allows us to see ourselves in an infinite realm of possibility instead of in this narrow sort of tunnel of, I want to be like that. I want this going on in my life. I have these goals. I have to do these things. I have to get sober. I have to be free. I have to be able to,
So David.
Yes.
We're going to run out of time here
in
a bit. So what haven't you said, or what haven't I asked that you want to communicate?
This is what happens every time I do a podcast or an interview, is that I digress into all of these different areas that really relate to and empower and impact multiple communities of people. And I think I really want to shine a light on the recovery community and the gay men who are struggling to feel like, because I do poppers, I can't be an AA, or because I have sex with multiple guys and I have a very sex positive experience in my life, that I don't fit in with my community, or that I may never find a partner. And lots of different people that I like to talk to, because I like to do the work of, and I'll say it, sexual wholeness. The thing that happens in a lot of recovery modalities is we come in with a sense of brokenness, and we recreate that brokenness, and we re-manifest that brokenness, and we believe intuitively and are told throughout that program, you will always be broken, you have an incurable disease, where conscious recovery really comes from a place of you're already whole, and our job is just to uncover all of those illusions that cause us to create and remanifest this idea of brokenness. And that translates over to sexual wholeness or sexual wellness. And that's the work that I love doing in the world. And that's the work I've been doing most of my life anyway, is really breaking the shame game and breaking away from the ideas of not enoughness. I know I've said that a lot today, but I just feel like that's the best word, right?
Right. So I've been thinking about the name of my podcast lately, Becoming Wilkinson, which we talked a minute or two before. So it was originally my story, but then it's become everyone that sits in that chair's story. Their stories actually help me become. So my question for you right now is, who is David Wichman becoming?
I feel like I'm becoming who I've always been, but was unable to see. And I feel like that's on repeat, right? I'm becoming what I haven't. And this is a great question to ask yourself, is what's working in my life that I'm not seeing, right? So who am I becoming that I'm not seeing? That's who I'm becoming, is the parts of myself that I'm not seeing, rediscovering. Yeah.
Excellent.
Thank you.
We're probably going to have you back for a third podcast at some point.
Yeah, I would love that.
Maybe later this year. We won't wait this long.
Sounds great.
Thanks for coming in, David.
Thanks for having me.